Good evening and welcome to the first Cabinet meeting of 2021. I really do hope you all had a healthy Christmas, and for reasons I will explain later on, that is now and has been throughout the last year the highest priority of this administration and this council. My name is Stephen Cowan. I'm the leader of the London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham. I'd like to confirm the members of the Cabinet who are in attendance. And when I call your name, would you kindly just say good evening or hello, but indicate you're here. All right, so I'm going to start with the Deputy Leader, Councillor Sue Fenimore.
Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year.
Cabinet Member for Health and Adult Social Care, Ben Coleman.
Evening, Happy New Year.
Hello. Cabinet Member for Public Service Reform, Adam Connell.
Good evening.
Good evening. Cabinet Member for Children and Education, Larry Culhane.
Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year.
Cabinet Member for the Environment, Wesley Harcourt.
Good evening, everybody, and again, Happy New Year.
Cabinet Member for Housing, Lisa Homan.
Good evening, everyone, and a very Happy New Year.
Andrew Jones, Cabinet Member for the Economy.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Happy New Year also.
Cabinet Member for Strategy, Sue McMillan.
Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year.
Good evening. And Cabinet Member for Finance and Commercial Services, Matt Schmidt.
Good evening.
Good evening. That's a nice welcome. Max, thank you very much for that. All right, amongst the officers, the many officers we have in attendance is Kim Smith, who's the Chief Executive, and Rhian Davis, who's the Director of Resources and also the Monitoring Officer and Borough Solicitor within that role. Any officer that we call on to speak, we'll ask them to introduce themselves at that point. Before we get into the main agenda, I want to update everybody on some of the issues that we've all been working on over the Christmas holidays. And to begin, can I just ask everyone to put themselves on mute if you're not on mute at the moment, please? Because I can hear some background from there.
Councillor Cowan, just wanted to alert you, I don't think your camera's working, so if you could try again.
It should be. No, it's on, it's working. It's on, it's working, so does it really not show?
No, I can't see you, I'm afraid. I just see the frame that says you're there, but not you. So I'm just letting you know anyway.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly, I can see myself, and it says my camera is working. Can anybody else see me?
No, can't see you.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Okay, well, we'll just have to carry on like this, and I hope my voice, I'm going to try turning it off and turning it on again, which is... Anything?
I'm afraid not.
Okay, well, we'll have to carry on as like this. Okay, so if you can both just listen to my voice, then I will crack on. Right, so can I begin by thanking everybody who worked late into the night, often way into the early hours over the Christmas holidays. These Christmas holidays have been like none other we've ever experienced, because we're dealing with a global pandemic and every other issue that comes up over Christmas. The difficulty of it is often amplified because of those factors. I am very grateful that I could call people sometimes as late as 1 in the morning to deal with some of the issues that were coming up. And so I'm particularly grateful to all the council officers who worked really hard, and the sense of duty about protecting our residents and doing the right thing by our residents. One note to highlight of the Christmas period was the Pensioners' Christmas Party. Thank you to Councillor Fenimore for organising that. Unlike normal Christmases where people would come to the town hall and we'd all get a chance to meet people who would otherwise be at home, like the rest of us, they were at home this year, but we managed to deliver hot Christmas meals and presents to over 600 people. And again, I not just thank the council officers, but many of the volunteers who allowed us to do that, or indeed gave funds that allowed us to make it a really nice Christmas for those people. I remain, as ever, grateful to our NHS heroes. You know, you get to reflect a bit over Christmas. Where would it be now if the government planned to close Charing Cross Hospital in 2019 had been allowed to go ahead? You can only guess, but I think it would be in a dreadful situation. So I do remain grateful as time moves on to all the Save Our Hospitals Residents Group volunteers, Michael Mansfield QC, and our lawyers who worked with us to save the hospital. It is doing a valiant job, as is everybody in our NHS. And I know I speak for everyone in the borough when I send our huge thanks to those people who are working to keep people safe. And again, I think we need to send our sympathy to the business community who is struggling with all the consequences of the pandemic. And as we look forward to 2021, while the light is at the end of the tunnel with the vaccine, I think it is fair to say that the challenge of the disease is significantly worse than it has been at any point up until now. And I will detail that in a second. I want to tell the Cabinet that on Sunday, the 13th of December, all London's council leaders were called to an emergency meeting to be given an urgent update on the spread of the contagion as at that point. And what the Director of Public Health did in the presentation was to talk about what he thought was going to happen next. Now, I don't think I've ever seen him look so anxious about the prospect of what was going to happen next. He reported that since the beginning of December, when London was in Tier 2, the disease had moved to an exponential stage of growth, which meant it was beginning to grow rapidly. And while we had the power to contain it, within 8 days of that, he predicted that the disease would be moving to the uncontrollable stage of the epidemic within our country. London and Kent, as you now know from the press reports, were at the epicenter of that. And he very much urged an immediate lockdown. I was delighted and proud of all London's council leaders across parties that we unanimously called for Christmas, I'm sorry to say, to be cancelled, and for a Tier 3 plus that would see people not moving around the country to return to their families and friends across the world, and in many cases taking the disease with them. Sadly, he explained that we needed to have something that looked a lot like a lockdown within 8 days. And he said immediately, because within that period of 8 days, the disease would be spreading at such a rate it would be uncontrollable. And that did not happen. I can tell you, I was called to another emergency meeting on the 31st of December, where we were given an update from ministers and indeed their experts. And the killer fact for me that stood out, I shouldn't use that term, I'm sorry to use that term, was that within every London school, there will be, they believed, an estimated at least one COVID-19 contagious child in every class in every school. So that was by 13th of December. And as you know, there was a whole bunch of lack of clarity about what should happen to schools. And I'm glad that London councils were able to work together to persuade the government that all primary schools should remain closed. What we now know is that the disease is out of control. It is rapidly moving throughout London and spreading around the country. And it appears, as the First Minister of Scotland has done, that the only solution is for a lockdown. I want to point out two things. Firstly, this lockdown should have happened on the 13th of December when we were advised it was necessary. And the prevaricating and indecision that happened in the days afterwards, where literally hundreds of thousands of people travelled around the country, that has added to our problems. Now, the Prime Minister is about to speak at 8 o'clock. There's mixed reports about whether he's going for a lockdown or a Tier 5 set of extra obligations. I don't think it's good enough. We need a lockdown, and we need a lockdown for at least a month, as the Scottish government has done. And if we don't do that, I fully expect that we will be in severe lockdown throughout the first 3 months of this year. Now, that's the problem with not acting early enough in a pandemic. So if you don't mind, and without having the faith to wait to see what the government will actually say, I'm going to run down the advice that I have been given by public health officials in the London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham and across London on what we think is the right way forward. So this is what Hammersmith and Fulham advises people to do. Number one, we think we need to strengthen school readiness and security. We need much more effective online teaching in secondary schools, but it is Hammersmith and Fulham's view that we should consider a delay of all schools opening and making sure that we do that within the space of making sure children are still able to keep their education through those necessary measures. And I think that needs to be for at least a month. Secondly, we would call on the government to delay return to university. Again, you're going to have students travelling from all over, and when the disease is at this stage, which particularly with the new variant, it is a high risk. There are anecdotal reports of people getting the disease when they've gone into coffee shops, wearing a mask, carrying sanitizer, and still catching the disease. And other anecdotal reports. Until we understand the nature of how this disease spreads, I think we have to be asking people to take much stronger measures. And that does bring me on to the next stage, which is Hammersmith and Fulham urges people to stay at home and indeed only mix within their bubble. We don't believe that group sports or any mixing outside should be possible, and indeed we think it's the only way to get through this at this stage. So therefore we would urge you people to stop mixing outside with people outside of their bubble, and if you are outside, always wear a mask and carry sanitizer. Indeed, we would urge the government to have stronger mandates on mask wearing. Many supermarkets have told their staff not to police people not wearing masks. You do get examples of people in shops not refusing to wear the mask. I believe that people shouldn't be served, and indeed the supermarkets and the law enforcement agencies need to take robust action to make sure that people do wear masks in those scenarios. And we think local government should be given greater powers to enforce some of those compliance and enforcement measures, something that has not happened as yet. Sadly, we think pubs need to fully close, no sale of alcohol via takeaway or anything else. We think there should be a testing program that matches with the areas where we believe the contagion is strongest, but that should be secondary to the vaccination program. I mean, if people are now widely infected with the disease across Hammersmith and Fulham and across London, with the testing program, which was only ever designed to tell us where the disease was. It wasn't ever to give the recipient of the test safety, because you could be tested on the day and still have the disease, but it wouldn't pick up on it. And you'd need to be tested just before you become symptomatic for it to be picked up on. So the testing is not solid. Then we think the testing program, whilst it's essential in some areas, should be secondary to the vaccination program, and all efforts should be put onto that. And we think there needs to be a huge business support program. There's many of those businesses are solid, good businesses, and they will go under and people will become unemployed. We have just a little longer now to go until the summer, when we believe the vast majority of Britons will have been vaccinated. Therefore, we need a government support mechanism that is going to support those businesses that are likely to go bankrupt, that are solid businesses, and we call for that to happen immediately. There are some of the measures that we've talked about, but the simplest explanation is stay home to stay safe and do not mix with people outside of your household. The disease is now technically in the uncontrollable stage, and the only way to put this thing back in its box is for all of us just to close things down for at least the next 2 weeks, possibly to the end of the month. That's where we're at, and I'm sorry we're at that stage, but if we'd acted on the advice of the government, of the health professionals on the 13th of December, I think we'd be in a very different place. In terms, and I'm happy to take any questions on that later. I don't know if Councillor Culhane, or indeed Councillor Coleman, Councillor Culhane for Education and Children, and Councillor Coleman for Public Health and Adult Social Care, whether they want to add anything at this point. I'm looking and see no indication of that. So
you set it out very well. It's very worrying.
Okay.
The figures in our borough, if you look at, we get a chart every day, and the figures in our borough for the amount of people testing as percentages was something like 3% at the beginning of people testing who went and had a test. About 3%, 4% at the beginning of December were positive. It's about 21% now. It's going like that. That's the share of people who get tested who prove positive. It's everything that you've said is of course exactly right, but the measures that we need to take belatedly are very serious, and right behind you on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I may, Leader, just on education, I just wanted to add to your thanks to everyone, particularly to our schools within the borough, who all throughout the pandemic have played a crucial role in the attempts to get control of the virus. There's a lot of debate at the moment around schools being open and shut. It should be remembered that, especially in this borough, most schools remained open throughout the pandemic for children of key workers and vulnerable children, which ultimately allow key workers to stay on the front line in ICU units and keeping us fed, etc., whilst we battled the virus. So thank you to them and to parents up and down the borough who were affected by that, whose patience has no doubt helped us in our battle against this. I think that the story you tell about the inaction of government is reflected in education all throughout this pandemic. Across the spectrum, there has been nothing but goodwill towards Gavin Williamson and his team to try and help keep education on the road throughout. But unfortunately, they've just been a day late and a dollar short throughout. We saw it with the exams. First of all, they took quick action to cancel the exams last summer, and then spent 4 months ignoring pleas to look at how they were going to sort out the results, and they didn't sort it until it was too late. We had the botched reopening to the wider cohort of children in the summer, where again calls from school leaders and academics and otherwise called for clearer guidance, which fell by the wayside with the government and ultimately led them to U-turning on their plans. And we see again in the lead up to Christmas, when schools and school leaders and staff were about to get their first break in 8 or 9 months. And we're quite desperate for a break. The government landed a testing scheme on them for the return to school in literally the last hours of the autumn term, when in fact schools have been calling for it 3 months earlier. And not only that, as the situation began to escalate over Christmas, there was just a vacuum of information. So not only did school staff and leaders have their Christmas cancelled by the sudden testing regime placed on them, which I think most people agree was welcome, but just 3 months too late. We then had the just ludicrous situation between Christmas and New Year's, which quite frankly is just totally unfair, I think, to school leaders, school staff and parents in this borough. And it continues now, but it's worth saying that schools do remain open to children of key workers and vulnerable children, and we thank our schools for everything they have done to handle all of the obstacles that have been put in their way. And I'm sure I can say that on behalf of everyone in this borough. But yeah, the story you tell of just government inaction is completely reflected, unfortunately, in education.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Kilhane. It's absolutely a very worrying time, and I absolutely share your admiration for the school teachers and teaching assistants who are not only putting themselves in harm's way, but are actually passionately working out how they can make sure children get an education at this time. And indeed, that's one of the many issues that comes onto our finances, because as you know, we've spent tens of millions of pounds on COVID so far, and not all the government money that was promised has been returned. And new measures, whether it's spending £600,000 on mortuary costs, or whether it's looking to make sure that every single child has technology access so they can take part in online learning, are huge new challenges that none of us were facing this time last year. So I am very grateful to all the officers and indeed my fellow councillors for rising to the challenge in this way. I do need to report on Hammersmith Bridge, which has continued to carry on as an issue, as all of you know. And I will just run through some of the issues that have gone on. There are all sorts of strange rumours being put about. Some of them, I'm told, are being put about by government ministers, which are simply not true. So I want to shoot some of those things, those foxes. One of them is that Hammersmith and Fulham is refusing to put any money in. I'm particularly disgusted by that slur because it's just simply not true. If I explain that so far Hammersmith and Fulham spent 5.7 million to comprehensively diagnose all the structural failings with the corroded suspension structure and carry out works, then that in itself, the 5.7 million, is more than almost every other London council has ever spent on their bridges. We're also spending approximately £200,000 to commission the Foster Cowie Bridge, which we believe is likely to be a much more effective solution than had been previously mooted, and we've asked them to scope that out and indeed are paying out of our own taxpayers' money £200,000 to get that work moved on to the next stage. And I have ensured that they have presented to the task force, and indeed I understand they are presenting to the Secretary of State for Transport shortly. And when I met with him, he gave a very positive indication to that innovative idea. And this year, on top of the 5.7 million, we will spend an extra 2.7 million for the works we're carrying out. And as you know, those works are on a variety of different things, including putting heat stabilisation works in and many other factors that stop the bridge falling into the river and indeed get it ready to get fixed. These are staggering amounts when you consider our total revenue account is 124 million, and when you consider the priority for us at the moment is COVID-19 and the up to 25 million we spent so far, it gives you an idea, most of that in the first wave, of how much the second, more damaging wave could cost us in a wide and eclectic range of areas that the council is rising to the challenge of dealing with. There is a lot of confusion about London bridges, and partly it's because it's typically confusing in a very British way. Hammersmith Bridge is a London bridge which is mostly to the benefit of people outside of Hammersmith and Fulham. Most of the contacts I get from people are from Barnes. There are a small number of people in Fulham who contact me, many of which are Conservative Party activists. On the whole, most people in Hammersmith and Fulham want the bridge fixed, but do not think it is reasonable that they pay for the vast majority of those works. So I will tell you that Baroness Beer wrote to me on the 27th of October and confirmed that normally bridges are paid for by Transport for London because all strategic works are paid for TfL. For a variety of reasons, including then no longer able to do so, Transport for London are not able to put any more in than 16 million. That is part of the 25 million that was agreed to be given to Hammersmith and Fulham in 2015. And they have paid a substantial amount of that. But if you compare the money spent on other bridges, if you take, for example, Royal Borough of Kensington, Chelsea paid 2.6 million to get the Ibrox Bridge fixed, and TfL contributed the bulk of that by paying 7.1 million. And if you look at other bridges, such as the Chiswick Bridge, well, that's run by TfL, and that cost 9 million, but it was paid for by TfL, so it didn't cost Hounslow or Richmond anything to do that up. Then you could say we were quite unlucky in 1985 when they were handing out bridges and we got given Hammersmith Bridge. No, it's a beautiful bridge. It's a British national asset. It's grade 2-star listed. But it is one of the first engineering structures from that mid-Victorian period to be put up. It's the first suspension bridge ever put across the Thames. And it's a particularly badly designed bridge because the materials of cast iron and wrought iron are just not suitable for the reasons we've often discussed. But if you look at the comparison of other bridges spending very small amounts of money, and I'll give you the example of Wandsworth spending £6 million to fix Wandsworth Bridge, which is a steel cantilever bridge opened in 1940, then you can see how our bridge, which is £141 million, and is a ornate structure from the 1880s, then the two things just aren't comparable. So we got unlucky when it comes to the payment, although I think lucky in the way the bridge looks and how it adds to our borough. So that's where we are. I met with the Secretary of State for Transport, the Right Honourable Grant Shapps MP, on the 25th of November, and was surprised that he told me that we should have to pay 50% of the cost of Hammersmith Bridge, which, if you take the lower charges that the task force looked at by removing inflation, so it's a temporary loss of inflation, that would give us a £63 million bill to the people of Hammersmith and Fulham. And we could borrow that money on particularly low rates of interest from the Public Works Loans Board, but that would be cost between £3 and £7 million, depending a year, out of our reduced revenue accounts, just to pay off that level of money. And I don't believe that's the right thing for us to do, because whilst I appreciate the Minister's wish that we should be fair to taxpayers, I was a bit surprised that he suggested that Hammersmith and Fulham, having the third lowest council tax, which I'm very proud this administration has been able to deliver that, is a problem for him, and we should put council tax up to pay for a bridge that is largely not to the benefit of our residents. And to do that at a time when many people are facing unemployment and business failure, I think is the wrong thing to do. So I respectfully decline to do that, but we may well find ourselves in a legal fight with the government on that issue, something that we will do if we have to. So that's where we are with what they were arguing. I would say that there was much nonsense talked about Hammersmith and Fulham's reserves. Some people had said that there'd been a misreport, and we got a kind note from a journalist who'd misreported the story, so we had about £500 million of reserves, and he got a kind note to say he'd corrected it and apologised for it, which was very nice of him. But there was a lot of misunderstanding created, and that was brought up in my conversation with the Minister. And I pointed out that keeping reserves is the right thing to do. And indeed, our reserves are significantly lower than Hertfordshire County, who's in real terms, which is that theirs is 35 million, but they're a smaller council. Wandsworth Council, 323 million, Westminster Council, 218 million. So you can see that our reserves are significantly lower than that, which are at the moment. Max, you want to confirm the latest figure? Would you want to come in on that latest figure, Max? What would the reserve stand at this point, please?
So our reserves are a little under 100 million, but another point of misunderstanding, which I think people have had, is around loans to other councils, and people have misunderstood the fact that when we had large cash balances due very largely to the money that we held from Capco for the purchase of the West Kent and Gibbs Green estates, money that we couldn't spend. We had to keep that money safe, and putting it all into banks wasn't safe because bank deposits at that level aren't guaranteed by government. So we lent some of it to councils, which is a much safer way of keeping money. It actually generates more interest. So at that time, people noted that we had over £100 million lent to other councils, but it was mainly the money that we actually ended up paying back to Capco so that we could secure the return of the West Kent and Gibbs Green estates. And we now have much smaller balances lent to other councils in the low tens of millions, which is less than Westminster, is less than Wandsworth, and is less than Hertfordshire County Council, where Grant Shapps has his seat. So hopefully that's not a point he'll take any further, because our loans to other councils are actually quite small now.
That's right. And I'm sorry, I misquoted the figures. The figures I gave you for Wandsworth and Westminster and Hertfordshire are indeed money they've lent to other councils, and our loans are £17 million at the time. And as you quite rightly say, Max, these loans are guaranteed by government, unlike loans to a bank, having the money in a bank, and indeed we get better interest on them that way around. So it's created a lot of misunderstanding, but as you can see, it's not the money to fix the bridge. I think the government task force, if you look at it now, I mean, I spoke to Baroness Beer on the 9th of September when she first called me to say they were setting up the task force, and asked her, could we have finance options on the agenda as an urgent priority for the meeting that would happen the week after, I think on the 16th of September. And I indeed wrote that was in writing, but no such options were on the agenda. We have not been allowed to talk about financing options since the 9th of September. So I am a little bit perplexed that what the big issue that's holding us back is a lack of financing options. Hammersmith and Fulham and TfL have put vast amount, millions of pounds in together into Hammersmith Bridge, and so it's just simply not true. We're not offering any money. Together, we've offered over £22 million, which is the local offer that Baroness Veerum's calling for. And I am just puzzled why we're not allowed to speak about this. I have reached out to the private sector, and we're looking at toll options, and we're working out how we can do that. But at the moment, I do ask myself, what the hell are we meeting with the task force for? Because at the moment, it doesn't seem to be doing very much at all, and I think essentially it has delayed the implementation of the bridge. Let's give an example of that. We in TfL were making good headway from the moment we closed the bridge, pulling bits off, analysing the works, commissioning all the different legal hurdles you have to go through to procure engineers, and yet we knew we would run out of money in the summer period of 2020 from the mid part of the first wave of the pandemic, when TfL's finances essentially evaporated. And so at that point, I am the leader of London Borough of Richmond, wrote to the Prime Minister, and he responded by setting up a task force. Now, prior to that, there were meetings with officials who told us they were going to give us all the money to stabilise the bridge, which was 46 million quid. And they were just working out what account to take that money from. Well, after the task force happened, all talk of that stopped. And indeed, we haven't been allowed to talk about any of the options we've been doing to raise finance. And indeed, I just think there's a lot of PR games getting played. The worst of which was the 27th of November. We were sent a very bulky set of reports just 37 minutes before the meeting was due to start. Those reports said we'd closed the bridge too easily. They were computer-generated desktop reports. The people who wrote the reports hadn't analysed the bridge. Indeed, it appears they just looked at photographs on Hammersmith and Fulham Council's website. And we were sent the papers for the meeting 37 minutes before, but it transpired during the meeting that the chair of the task force had authorised briefings to the press in the days before, and that she deliberately kept those papers from the task force. Now, that type of stunt is the type of thing that I think people are getting sick and tired of. I know I certainly don't know what its members are, but I also think the residents rightly are too, on all across London who use the bridge. I can clarify that we are doing a mock McDonald report, which is actually pulling bits off the bridge and looking at it and seeing if it is safe to open. I can also assure people that the one thing I would like to do is to get rid of this problem and open the bloody bridge, but we will not do that if it risks the safety of people. And I'm not an expert, I'm a politician, so we listen to the world-class experts who we've hired and ask them to carry out the work. And that's the basis we make all decisions, listen to the experts and act on their advice. Now, I did say to the government 3 times to Baroness Veer in that meeting on the 27th of November, having released this report, which looks no more than a PR stunt, if you really are of the view that we've closed the bridge too early, would you take the legal responsibility for opening the bridge over immediately? We will have the papers signed up, our lawyers stand by ready to do that. And each time the subject was changed, the last time I think I was told I was very sweet for asking that question, and again the answer wasn't given. It is ridiculous, and I think we really do need to question what the task force is for, and if it's providing any benefit whatsoever. At the moment, all it has done is significantly delay any action. And I've written to the Minister, Grant Shapps, to point that out and hope that we will find a different way forward, because it's certainly not helping at the moment. That way forward should be that we get the works moved as quickly as possible. The MP for Richmond Park and the council leader for Richmond had wisely suggested very early on that the government funds up front the temporary works and we work out who's going to pay for what afterwards. It hasn't done that. which is why nothing is really of any substance is going on other than the Cowley works, and the works we're finishing, which we've commissioned in Hammersmith and Fulham, and some small amounts of works, £4 million worth of works that the government is making great claims about, but just deals with one of the 4 pedestals, and is nowhere near the minimum amount of work on the way forward. So that's where we are on the task force. I've written to the Minister asking for another meeting to talk about how a toll will work, and the different aspects of the national law that we will need to change in order to allow us to do that. I think as soon as we get surety on the financing, then we'll be able to make some progress, and I think that's the right way forward. So that's, I think, my update on the bridge. Does anyone have any questions about that? In which case, I will move on to the main agenda. Right, minutes of the Cabinet meeting held on the 7th of December. Are they agreed? Yeah, thank you very much.
Agreed.
Anyone disagree? I can tell from the apologies for absence there are none. Can I confirm that's still the case, Katia?
Yeah, no apologies for absence, Leader.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Okay, so we move on to the item number 4, Council Tax Support Scheme. Very proud of this work. Max, do you want to just talk about what that means, how it helps our local residents, and what the recommendations are in the report?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, under the coalition government, a benefit that used to be paid in full to residents who were on benefits to pay for their council tax by central government was devolved to local authorities, which sounded reasonable, except the government didn't devolve all the money to actually pay that benefit out, and it actually encouraged councils to require residents who are on benefits to pay part of their council tax. These are residents, struggling to get back on their feet and look after their families. Some of the most vulnerable families in the country were being asked to pay elements of their council tax, which obviously the government had already determined by awarding the benefits that they were struggling. So a lot of councils around the country did this and passed on that cut in effect to people on benefits up and down the country, and it's been found by sort of debt advice charities and others who work with those families that change actually drove a lot of people further into poverty and having to resort to loan sharks and other means that actually caused their debt to spiral and their financial circumstances to worsen. Us as an administration, every year that we've set a budget, have not done that. We've made sure that the council tax benefit is paid in full by the council, even though that means that we have to reach into our pockets as a council to fund that, which isn't easy to do when our funding from government continues to be cut every year in real terms. And this year, when we contend with COVID and all the financial difficulties that has presented to the council. So I'm proud to say that we're proposing that this policy continues next year, despite the financial difficulties that the local government sector across the country finds itself in. This will cost the council £9.1 million, which for an organisation of our size isn't extremely large amount, but it's an amount that we feel is the right thing to spend. Not only because it's the right thing to do for those families, but it's also the right thing to do in the long term for the council, because we need to be supporting residents when they're at their point of need to make sure that they can stabilise their financial situation, not have to resort to loan sharks and other desperate measures to try and pay council tax, but instead look after their children, find work, and get back into a position where they can in the future pay council tax. It's also the reason, Leader, why we've had the policy of not using bailiffs to collect debts to the council, because council tax sets the council. Again, not trying to drive people at their most desperate points further into desperation, because in the end that ends up costing us more money when people are driven into homelessness or children are struggled to stay in school, and it ends up costing the council and the wider public sector much more money. So this is the right policy not only because it's the right thing to do to support families, but it's also probably the right thing to do financially for the council in the long term. So that's why I commend it to the Cabinet.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. I think that is right. And I think one of the interesting things talking to the people at the food bank is the number of people who previously have never relied on any form of benefits who are now turning up for food bank. People from the gig economy, journalists, musicians, even people who had been starting out as architects. It is just amazing and shocking and upsetting the level of deprivation that COVID is causing, and we are only beginning to see the start of it at this point in 2021. So it's going to be a tough 6 months for a lot of people, and in those times people fully expect and have a right to expect government to be on their side, because if we help people, then they will help themselves. And that's very much part of our strategy. And I should clarify as well, we don't use bailiffs, which is a dreadful way of collecting money, because half the time all you're doing is taking a TV or a computer or something else you cannot sell for that much money. What we are doing is using much more sophisticated, smart measures to preempt people going into debt, and we are actually collecting more debt as a consequence. And that's, I think, a very important way forward, because it's being sympathetic while at the first time of being efficient and businesslike. Okay, right. So that's that report. Thank you very much for that, Max. Is that agreed, please?
Agreed.
Great. Good. We'll move on.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Does anyone disagree? I take that as no, in which case the report is agreed. Council tax base and collection, item number 5. Max, back to you again, please.
Thank you, Lee. This is a largely technical report that just reflects the number of households we have in the borough, but it does reiterate the point that both of us just made about the fact that we use an ethical debt collection method, and we do not use enforcement agents to collect council tax. This reaffirms that will continue for the next year. On the negative side, the report highlights that we estimate that will be £6 million down in council tax collection as families have fallen into difficulties specifically from COVID-19. The government at the beginning of the COVID-19 emergency back in the early spring said that they would refund councils for all of our costs and lost income from COVID-19. Unfortunately, they haven't done this, and they've now actually put that, instead they've given up pretending like they were going to do this, and they've put in writing that they're only going to refund us 75% of the council tax that we've lost from not being able to collect due to the COVID-19. And that's will leave a significant hole in our finances for next year that the budget that we propose next month will have to overcome. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions on that? Okay, in that case, is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And no one disagrees? Nope. Brilliant. So we move on to the next point then, which is the capital programme, monitor and budget variations. Max, over to you.
Thank you. I won't add much more to this. This is an update reflecting how our capital spend has proceeded over the year. As you won't be surprised to learn, some of the projects have slipped just because of the difficulties of proceeding in the current public health emergency. But you'll still see a strong commitment there, in particular to building genuinely affordable housing, and that will only increase in the coming years as we set out our capital plans next month for the future.
Okay, thank you very much. Is that item agreed?
Agreed.
Anyone disagree? No. In that case, we move on to the next item, please, which is the corporate revenue monitor. And surprise, surprise, Max.
Thank you. I guess the headline figure is that we do show a forecast and overspend at the end of the year, but I think at this point wanted to pay tribute. Normally that would be a cause not to pay tribute to officers, but actually when you compare the position that we're at financially now to where we were last year and the year before, when officers didn't have to contend with COVID-19 and the financial difficulties that caused, we're actually in a better position. We've got significant financial problems from COVID-19 that aren't being met by government. But when you exclude that, and when you look at mitigating actions that officers are putting in place now to make efficiency savings during the year, we actually estimate that our non-COVID-19 income and expenditure will actually have an underspend this year, which is quite extraordinary when you think of the amount of time and effort officers have had to put into reacting to COVID and all the different challenges that's placed. So overall, this is a positive message of the council being run very soundly financially by Emily Hill, our finance director, and her team, despite the enormous challenges of everyone working remotely and having to react to the challenges of this year.
Absolutely. One of which seems to be my camera still isn't working, as people keep texting me to tell me. So I do realise that the damn thing for some reason isn't working. Anyway, thank you for Max. Is that report agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Does anyone disagree? In which case that report is agreed, and we move on to item number 8, defend council homes policy. I know we have Shirley Cupit, who I'm very pleased to see here, although she can't see me, and to thank her for all the work she's done on that. I should just possibly introduce us myself, but I know Councillor Holman will want to say something in a second or two, and I know Shirley will also talk to the paper. This is a consequence of the how do we make council homes safe? And as you remember, for 8 years, council homes weren't unsafe before the Conservative administration had a policy of selling off estates at the MIPIN property conference in Cannes on the French Riviera. They went down there, offered many different estates. In fact, 2/3 of all our council estates were put for sale to be demolished and turned into luxury housing. We have a very good idea of what each of those schemes might have looked like because of the dreadful scheme agreed with Capital and Counties PLC, which, apart from claiming it would deliver 11% affordable housing, which is way below the target and it wouldn't have done, it would have actually bankrupted the council, because what they did was agree that we, the London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham, would buy back all the leaseholder and freeholder properties over the next 25 years at whatever rate that was agreed at over the next 25 years. And I think most people have an understanding that property inflation in London is fairly high, but we would do that with the money that was not index linked and that was given to us in 2012. And that money would have run out very quickly. And indeed, that money would, the deal was such that the council would have been bankrupted by it. So we managed to stop that deal. That's one of the ways we did that, was we kept the money in a special account. We lent it as a reserve to other councils, as we touched upon earlier. But we gave that money back at 2012 prices and got the estates back pretty much this time last year. And since then, the council's finances have been in a lot safer position. But and extremely importantly, the council residents of West Kensington and Gibbs Green Estates do not now have to worry that we will sell off their homes and kick them out of the borough, which is what the plan had been to do. Clearly, many other residents were interested in what was going on there, and one of the first estates to be looked at for demolition was the Queen Caroline Estate. So it's very good that the chair of the Queen Caroline Estate Residents Association is here to talk about this. But before I bring Shirley in, Lisa, would you like to say anything, please?
Yeah, thank you. As Cabinet may very well be aware, and other people listening this evening may be aware, we have been through a number of stages, a number of processes to try and look at how we can safeguard homes for residents in Hammersmith and Fulham in the future. And we've worked really closely with residents throughout this. The initial plan was not possible due to the government turning around and stopping any sort of cooperative style arrangements and stopping the funding for that. So we had to find another way, and you yourself, leader, decided to set up the Defend Council Homes unit, which I was absolutely delighted Shirley agreed to be part of and chair. And they set about finding a way of safeguarding our estates for the future so that other residents didn't have to go through what West Kensington and Gibbs Green went through and what other estates were concerned about. This policy, I'm absolutely delighted to recommend it to Cabinet tonight. It's been through a really robust consultation process with council residents. Absolutely phenomenal that we got over 1,000 responses, and most of them were positive. I think that you can find that in section 12 of the report. I'm not going to say too much more because I think it's really important that we've got Shirley here as a resident who has felt the pain of this, and I know she wants to strongly recommend to Cabinet that we approve it tonight. I hope that we do, and I would just like to reiterate what the leaders said. Thank you so much for all the work that's gone in to the team, and for all of the residents that have been involved and supported us with this over what's been a painful number of years now. So thank you.
Thanks. I would stress the best way to not ever have your home sold from underneath you is never to vote anyone into office who would do that to you. But I'm sure we all can recognise that. And indeed, that hasn't happened for the last 2 elections. Shirley, would you like to come in on that point, please?
Thank you, Leader and Councillor Homan. Yes, I do wholeheartedly recommend this report, and I hope that Cabinet will approve it. As Councillor Homan said, we've been through. We've spent a few years getting to this point in various ways, and what I particularly like about this policy is that it does put residents at the table. It does mean that if there is redevelopment, or if there are ideas of redevelopment in an area that will affect us and our homes, we will know about it very early, and we will be at the table discussing what that redevelopment might look like, and working alongside the council to come to some good conclusions. So it's not anti-development, but what it is anti-residents being shut out until such a point as a deal has already been done and our homes have already been put at risk. And the leader referred to the past, and I think the fear and anxiety that many of us experienced over that period of time when we did become aware of our homes potentially being offered up as sort of lucrative business investments for the future, but not for our future. So this policy does give, I think, real extra protection to residents, and it gives it in a legal form. So it's a policy that has some teeth. I'm not going to go into the detail of it because you have the report there and you can read it, and I'm sure you have sort of looked at the detail of it. But it does give some legal weight to residents about decisions that affect their homes. And the development of the policy, I think, has also been a real model of co-production, which I know is something this council is very keen on. And having been, the chair of the DCHU and working very closely with the council, both with councillors and with officers, and also appropriate experts coming together to come up with something. It is, I think, a real model, and I'm very grateful. It's been an honour to be invited to be part of that process. And similarly, the consultation that took place with residents in the middle of a pandemic, when officers had to do everything online. We couldn't have the usual public meetings, the things that you would normally be doing to engage residents. And thanks to the hard work of the resident involvement team and some creative thinking on everybody's part, we did get a phenomenal level of response. To get something like over 1,000 responses about a policy that's quite legalistic, quite technical. It wasn't something that people might see immediately affecting their lives, like repairs or street cleaning, or all the things that people think about day to day. So to get such a decisive response from residents, overwhelmingly in favour of this policy, was very heartening, and I think it also shows, how very genuinely this council does want to hear residents' voices and work according to what those voices say. So that's really all I wanted to say. I hope you do approve this report and implement this policy, because I think it will give extra protection to residents and therefore more security and peace of mind to residents.
Thank you for that, Shirley. And before we close on that, I will ask for a vote before I give my final comments on this report. So can I ask, does the Cabinet agree this report?
Absolutely agree.
Agreed.
Anyone disagree? That's a no. The report has now passed the legislative process for the borough's system and is now agreed by the Cabinet. So can I just take a moment, Shirley, to thank you, because I remember the very early days when you first found out your estate was under threat, and you turned up and wanted to go through the papers that we'd uncovered when we were in opposition. We met in the opposition office. I think you were shocked to see that your home had been offered for sale in Mippin, and people were actually planning demolishing it, and you were a secondary thought. They then changed the planning agreement for the whole borough, which showed that whilst residents in some areas would be offered some homes on the area they had to live in, you wouldn't. So that then placed the question, where were you going to live, having lived in the borough for a very long time, as had many of your neighbours? And all of this happened in secret without public oversight. And that has ended today. Any future administration that seeks to behave like that will at the very least have to be a lot more open and open themselves up to public scrutiny. In practice, it was a real effort for people power, because actually part of the reason I think that was stopped was because of the vote that people then had in the horror of what was going on to the council estates. So all I can do is say this has been a long fight for you. I first met you in 2009. Here we are in 2021 agreeing a mechanism to help protect council homes a little bit more than it's currently protected. And you were the commission chair, and then you were the chair of the Defend Council Homes Unit. It's a tremendous amount of effort. You've done it all for free out of public duty. And like all our commission chairs, it's that sense of civic responsibility that is something we've been trying to nurture as an administration across all areas of how we operate. And it's no better epitomised by you, Shirley Cupid, for the amazing leadership you've shown in fighting not just to save your homes, but for the principle that you're not second-class citizens. You have a right to be here as anybody else, and you are a cherished member of our community if you live in council housing. So thank you very much for that, Shirley. It's been extremely heroic work over 12 years, and I know the whole Cabinet sends our warmest congratulations and thanks to you for doing this and leading on it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Here, thank you.
Okay. All right. On that note, on that bombshell, I will move on to the excitement of the procurement strategy for travel care taxi services, and ask Councillor Culhane to introduce his report.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you again, Shirley, for all you've done for residents in the borough. This report is about the procurement of the travel care services in Hammersmith and Fulham. In other words, making sure that young people in the borough with special educational needs and looked after children can get to education every day and other services too. Now, there's some context to this. The reason why we're coming with this report is because the framework that we have currently is expiring this year and cannot be renewed, and we want to procure it on a similar basis. But the history to the report goes back much longer than 2017, when this framework began. There's been a load of things I think we can all be proud of that this council has done with residents, not to them. There's the civic campus, which many of us have as our backgrounds. There's the saving of the West Kensington and Gibbs Green estates, saving Sullivan Primary School from closure, saving Charing Cross Hospital from demolition, and as we've just heard, the Defend Council Homes policy from Shirley and the Disabled People's Commission. The list could go on, but I think one thing that doesn't get spoken about in those terms is the framework for taxi travel care services in this borough, which I'd invite Councillor Coleman and Councillor Macmillan to talk on after I finish. But I think that is one of the pieces of work we could be most proud of as a council, and I'll let them give the context to that. But we want to procure again from 2021 on a similar basis. And aside from what I've already said, it's worth noting that from the original procurement of this framework back in 2017, and we've actually since then invested just under an additional £1 million a year in the contract as it currently stands. So not only did we procure a much better contract than we inherited from the Tri-Borough way back in 17, which I'd invite other colleagues to talk on, we've also invested even more money on it with the help of residents. So happy to take any questions, but I would invite colleagues to speak on the story of this, as I saw firsthand just how hard they worked on making this a much better procurement framework.
Okay, well, on that note, Councillor Macmillan, would you like to come in on that? Councillor Coleman?
Yeah, sure. No, thank you. It was, Larry, I'm delighted that this is still going forward. We're still doing this. We're still spending the money that we need to do to make sure that disabled children, students and old people get us to come safely to school. Because, as you know, one of the really the most appalling problems and scandals that we had to address when we were elected in 2014 was the fact that the previous administration, using the Tri-Borough, which existed then, which we were unfortunately still stuck in, had signed a contract with a load of people who had no idea how to transport disabled children safely to school. And I was a governor of a school for autistic young people and children at the time, and I was hearing, before we were elected, I was hearing from parents terrible stories of autistic kids being left to run around in the streets, off the buses by themselves, escorts who spoke no English. So if there'd been a hospital emergency for a tube-fed child, they wouldn't have been able to get them hospital care that they needed, and all sorts of terrible problems. And I remember well that, you know, when we got elected, one of the first things I did was go and see a group of, I think it was a dozen parents of disabled children. They all told me stories like this, which I gave to the leader and to Councillor Macmillan, who was the Cabinet Member for Education at the time, and they were denied. It was denied that there was a problem by our senior officers. And the really awful thing was that I think I remember us raising this with the leaders of other councils, and one of them said we were just making trouble. And we were thinking, in a Tri-Borough, who sticks up for us? Who sticks up for our residents? Who sticks up for our disabled children? So we determined to do what was needed. You'll recall this, and Councillor Macmillan led on this. We were determined to do whatever we needed to change this contract, which was all about transport and had nothing about care in it. And it took us a battle. We had to battle Westminster Council. We had to battle Tri-Borough officers who are no longer with us. Well, we're no longer in the Tri-Borough, but they'd retired before the Tri-Borough came to an end. And we, as a result, brought in a contract which has been all about caring for young people and children who were transporting to school, and not just about cutting and doing things as cheaply as possible and not worrying about the misery that was caused. And I have to say, I mean, Steve, leader, you may want to add something on this, but it certainly made me very, very early on sceptical about the value that the Tri-Borough was bringing, because there was nobody in the leadership, the top leadership in Hammersmith and Fulham, who was prepared to challenge this Tri-Borough contract on behalf of Hammersmith and Fulham residents. And it made the whole issue of the Tri-Borough and who sticks up for Hammersmith and Fulham very, very strongly and acutely pronounced in our minds. And for me, certainly, it was something that made me very sceptical about it, the Tri-Borough, very, very early on. And when we looked at the Tri-Borough in more detail and we saw many of the other problems it created, I wasn't surprised. But anyway, sorry, that's rather a long disquisition. I'm delighted that we bring this back today, and I'm delighted that care is as important part of the transport that we offer to disabled children and young people now as it was in 2014 when we had to rescue this awful conservative Tri-Borough contract. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Can I come in? Sorry, can I come in now?
Yeah.
Sorry, my mute was not turning off for some reason, and Councillor Coleman very succinctly said most of what I was going to say, so thank you for that, Councillor Coleman. But yeah, I mean, I think the key point is we faced a real battle to turn this service around 6 years ago when we were first elected, and it was very much about making it about travel care and support rather than just seeing vulnerable children essentially as kind of cargo that had to be carried around, which is frankly what the view was previously. And we were told at the time that what we wanted to do couldn't be done, so we did it. Thanks to lots of involvement from many parents of children with special needs. And I have to say, in particular, the head teachers of the two schools in the borough that serve children with special needs. And we did it, and I'm just delighted to see that we're able to continue doing it. And I honestly do think if we had stayed in the tri-borough arrangement, there is no way we would have been able to continue with the success we've had with it. So that's all I would add.
Okay, well, look, thank you very much, Councillor Macmillan and Councillor Coleman, for your leadership at that time. I do remember it as a very painful introduction to office. And indeed, as you've oft heard me quote the Peter Drucker quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. The culture that we quickly realised, because we come in open-minded to the tri-borough, what we realised was the core value seemed to be callous indifference, because not only had they procured the service as a desktop procurement and hadn't spoken to any of the parents or the teachers or anybody involved, which is why there was absolute chaos, and from the roots to desperately disabled, desperate children being dropped off hours and hours late, often in dreadful and life-threatening conditions. But no one seemed bothered when parents reported this. It was all part of the cause. So it was one of those early insights to the rot that was the tri-borough. And we managed to extricate from that contract, and later, thankfully, from the tri-borough. So thank you very much for your leadership on that during that period. And without anything else, I look forward to making sure that we have even higher standards in the new procurement. So on that basis, is item number 9 agreed?
Agreed.
Anyone disagree?
Agreed.
Absolutely agreed.
Yeah. No one disagrees, in which case that has become agreed. Item number 10, update collaboration agreement for children's social care. Do you want to give a brief introduction, Larry?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. It will come as no surprise to anyone having heard Councillor Coleman and Councillor Macmillan talk about the days in the tri-borough, that in 2018 we left the tri-borough agreement for substantive children's services. But we did leave some smaller arrangements in place because they suited us and the children in this borough at the time. Naturally, we're now 2.5 years into that. We've had an Ofsted, etc. We review everything as we should. And actually, there's changes we want to make to 3 areas to pull out of the tri-borough agreements we have in 3 areas. The most notable of which is the local safeguarding children's partnership, which is where we come together with health and the police and other organisations to look at the well-being and safety of young people in this borough. And we, through a review, we think that it will be best if we have a sovereign board for our borough. So that's the main one. There's a few other changes as well. Happy to take any questions, but otherwise I commend the report.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Is that report agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Does anyone disagree? Nope. In that case, report item number 10 is agreed, and we move on swiftly to item 11. And again, I call on Councillor Culhane.
Yeah, sorry, last one from me. This is a procurement strategy for school meals in the borough. Again, the current contract we have cannot be extended anymore, so we need to go out to procurement again. This is the contract that means basically that there is a hot school meal in schools every day that students are in. Not every schools aren't obliged to buy into this contract. They can make their own arrangements if they so choose. This contract caters for, at the moment, around 30 schools. And there's a big focus, as you'll see in the report, on high quality foods, relationships with local suppliers, sustainability, and healthy eating. Like I said, schools aren't obliged to join this contract, and it talks about this in the report. And actually, the end goal of this report in 2 or 3 years' time, depending on how long we procure for, is to help schools seek ways that they can make school meals work better for them. So for some schools, that may be having something in-house themselves. It may be working with other charities and companies or other arrangements, whatever suits them and their situation and their children's best. And their children best, will always support them to do that, as it makes out in the report. And in the future, we think the learning partnership, which is a collaboration of a load of our and particularly maintained primaries will play a large role in that moving forward. But again, happy to take any questions.
Okay, and that's very good. Are there any questions? So report agreed.
Agreed.
And thank you very much. Anyone disagree? That's no, in which case item number 11 is agreed. Okay, item number 12, Councillor Homan, Rust Sleeping Service Procurement Strategy.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, this is actually a report which was previously considered back in February 2020, so almost a year ago now. But the original implementation of the strategy was not delivered because of COVID, and it's given the council an opportunity to review our strategy. And so this is an updated strategy with the learning from COVID. I would recommend it to the Cabinet in that it reduces the number of providers and will make the service more efficient and joined up. So the opportunity that we've had in that extra time should actually assist us in terms of delivering what is actually a very good service in the borough for us sleepers. I don't know if Councillor Fenimore wants to add anything to that, given the Rough Sleeping Commission, which was
that would be wonderful if I may, and Leader as well, if I may. I think what this does as well is gives us an opportunity to build on the outstanding and excellent work that's been going on in relation to rough sleeping. As you may recall, we did a Rough Sleeping Commission 4 years ago now, and it was chaired by the CEO of Crisis. We asked him to come and share with us his thinking about how we can ultimately end rough sleeping entirely, because that is the goal and the vision in the borough. And this builds on the work and builds on the recommendations that he made to us. And actually, it's a really good opportunity to get a more cohesive service that best supports vulnerable people who are often rough sleeping for all sorts of reasons. And I think the scary thing is, since the pandemic, we will be seeing a lot of people having to use those services, because I think the phrase is you're only ever one paycheck away from being homeless. And it's something that I'm very mindful of whenever we look at any contract as well. So I think this is an opportunity to consolidate it, give a better service. I heartily commend this report.
Great. Are there any questions, please? In which case, does the Cabinet approve this report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Does anyone disagree? In which case, item number 12 is approved. Thank you. Item number 13, contract award for major refurbishment works of Maystar Estate. From the housing revenue budget, we should clarify. Councillor Homan.
Yeah, I won't say very much about this report other than it is a contract award for major works to Maystar, which desperately need doing. If I could draw the Cabinet's attention to page 192 to 201, which I think on paragraph 2 on page 196 gives you the kind of outline of the works that are going to be undertaken. But I don't really think I want to add more than that. It's part of our capital programme in terms of delivering better quality council homes, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Brilliant. Okay. Any questions on that note? No. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
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 Any disagreements? Thank you very much. That report is agreed. We move on to Hartop and Lannoy. New council homes being built on what was a decrepit series of rotten buildings. Andrew Jones. Oh, sorry, I've jumped one, haven't I?
Yeah.
We move on to disposal of Watermeadow Court, which is extremely good news. Andrew Jones, do you want to talk about that, please?
Yes, thank you, Leader. I will indulge you for a moment, because this also, we've talked a lot about genuinely affordable homes, our commitment as a council to building those. This also is a bit of a saga which I heartily endorse, because we have reached a stage now on this site in South Fulham where we are disposing the land which we own to a joint venture between Peabody Housing and a developer to deliver 50% affordable homes. Historically, this site was a development we inherited from the previous Conservative administration, with a very low level of affordable housing on it. We'd worked through the previous arrangement with the developer to increase that and to link it to build more affordable homes with a site in mid Fulham, but due to changes in the market, the deal didn't continue, and this has given us the opportunity to do what we would have wanted to do when we were elected in 2014, which is build a greater proportion of genuinely affordable homes. So on the site we have 50%. We are moving forward. It has been going on for some while. The site is clear, but we will next summer hopefully be on track to start construction of this development for completion in 2024 of 108 genuinely affordable homes, which we've been talking a lot about this evening. So I heartily endorse this report to you.
Excellent work, Andrew. And I would say this is, been a point of controversy in Sands End for some time. People saw the building sitting empty. It's a scheme we inherited, a dreadful scheme where a private developer was brought in who did not, I don't think, behave the right way. And in the end, it was a dreadful, dreadful scheme. We managed to get out of that deal. We have a new partner, and we're very, very excited about this scheme. So thank you very much for that, Andrew, and to all your officers. Is that report, any questions on that report? Nope, in which case is it agreed?
Yep.
Agreed.
Anyone against it? Or abstaining, I should say. In which case, that item 114 is agreed, and then we do swiftly move on to Hartop and Lannoy. Andrew, do you want to talk about what we're doing there?
Yes. So, and Councillor Homan may wish to comment. This site is existing several buildings with existing council housing that had structural problems, and therefore we can't continue to occupy them. This is created the need to redevelop the site, and also we are taking the opportunity, as the report explains, to increase the amount of generally affordable housing on the site. There's been a great deal of consultation with the current residents and the residents in this part of Fulham, and Lisa will talk about that, but this is really the budget approval report to take that project forward, to move to the next stage and redevelop the site. I'll pass over to Lisa because I think she may want to say a thing or two.
Thank you, Andrew. I do want to say something about the consultation, because given that we had the Defend Council Homes policy earlier, I think that the work that we did with residents, albeit in extremely different circumstances from what had gone under previous administrations, is a testament to how we should be working with residents in terms of consulting with them about anything that we do. And I was really heartened just before Christmas, when we were in that kind of slightly lighter lockdown period, where I went along to take a look at the hoardings around Hartop and Lannoy. And I met two children from St John Lilly School, Larry, along with their teachers, who had put a lot of effort into doing lovely drawings and actually making the area really attractive. It's not possible to do that very often because of COVID at the moment, but it was nice, and I would encourage anybody, if they're going for their 5 minutes walk exercise and they happen to be in the local area or cycling past, to go and have a look and just feed back to those kids who we have made a commitment to carry on engaging with throughout the consultation process going forward, which I think is very much in the ethos of this council, however young or old you are.
Okay, well, look, thank you very much for that. It's good work. Does anyone have any questions? Is that report agreed?
Yes, agreed.
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 Does anyone disagree? In that case, item 15 is agreed. Thank you very much. We move on to the forward plan and decisions. Can I ask that everyone notes those decisions?
Noted.
Noted. Thank you. And then finally, item number 17, which is any other business. I would just again stress the Prime Minister started broadcasting presumably about 3 minutes ago, if he's gone to schedule. I would stress to every resident watching this that we are in unprecedented times again, because the scale of the epidemic has moved on to a level that is worse than the first wave, as we think. And therefore, containing the length of the lockdown, which I think will come at some point, if not tonight, relies on all of us looking at the evidence, looking at what's going on, and taking the safest precautions. So can I please stress the safest thing to do is to stay home. That will not just save lives, it will stop the pandemic from being a very causing a very long lockdown, and it will save businesses and livelihoods. Secondly, can I just stress, do not mix with anyone outside your household. This new variant is particularly contagious, and take all the precautions that the World Health Organization advises, and hopefully our government will catch up and do the right thing to keep people safe ahead of the time, instead of reacting to when it's too late, as I presume it is doing at this exact moment. Stay safe, and Happy New Year. And I look forward to a vaccinated Britain sometime in the summer, when we can begin to look again in those salad days at a little bit more sunny happiness, and hopefully learn the lessons of this pandemic and try and build a better country for us all to live in. Good luck. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.